recapping this 2008 Jeep Liberty with the 3.7 V6 that had the random misfire code 0300, and then one time only a 0301 for cylinder 1. It was a driving vehicle. It stuttered sometimes, rough idled sometimes, other times ran like a champ. And it's been quite a bit of diagnosing. I just wanted to talk about all the steps and processes I went through and what I found out. So, you know, I've got my Foxwell scan tool to give me all the data, and it's a pretty good one if you need something on the cheap, like 65 bucks or something, I can't remember. All my pages of data from the scan tool. So, you know, you're looking at stuff and you're looking at O2 sensors and fuel trims, and you're trying to look at those items and figure out where to lead you down the next path. You know, I don't want to just swap parts. I want to know what it is that we're tracking down. So, you know, we start with O2 sensors. You know, what are they reading? What do they mean? Leads you down a path that, okay, so there's too much fuel and or not enough oxygen coming in, or too much oxygen coming in if there's a vacuum leak. So you start looking for every vacuum leak that you possibly can in the motor. You know, you're spraying the throttle body cleaner on everything and nothing changes. Next step, we're just going to look for sparks. So, you know, we're pulling the spark plug boots, and we're just, you know, pulling the ignition coils, unplugging them to listen to any sort of reaction in the motor. That didn't do a whole lot. So checking spark plugs, making sure that they look good, and they did. They look like they're firing a little bit hot, but nothing out of the ordinary. It looks like they were mostly clean firing. Pulled the fuel rail, checked the injectors to make sure none was stuck open or closed. You know, so then got the fuel pressure gauge and made sure we had good pressure at the fuel rail, which we did. Then you're doing compression checks on the vehicle, checking all of the cylinders. And, you know, cylinder compression, it was mostly pretty good. A couple of, that seemed a little off, but really all close within spec. So then we do a leak down test, trying to figure out what the next step is with the leak down gauge. And finally, what we found from the leak down test, we had a 14% air loss on cylinder 1, and you can hear the radiator bubbling through the access cap right there. You put your ear to it and you just hear it gurgling. You kind of get some noise out of the filler neck right there anyway, so that's normal because the piston rings don't seal 100%. But I just made notations of when I did hear something, just so I would have a reference point for that. So at the end of it, I mean, I also checked the EGR valve. I pulled it, and I pulled the evap purge solenoid, checked and verified to make sure they all worked, that there wasn't carbon blocking it up in it. There really was no signs of anything in particular that was happening. And I even I pulled the intake, I replaced the map sensor because it's stuck on the intake in a really poor spot down here. So I replaced that while I had the intake out. Replaced all the gaskets for the intake to make sure that there was a vacuum leak, that it was taken care of at that time, and that didn't change anything. So after confirming with the leak down test that it was in fact a head gasket problem on cylinder 1, all the other cylinders seemed to do pretty good. Cylinder 5 had a light bit of radiator noise in it. So it would be cylinder 1, 3, and 5. And on cylinder 5, when I pulled the valve cover, you could see a little bit of that discoloration you get with coolant in the oil. Though when you pulled the dipstick and when you checked the filler cap, there wasn't a lot going on. So nothing was leading this to a head gasket problem until we finally got down to exactly what it was by doing the leak down test and verifying that air pressure coming through. And of course, pulling the valve cover, you saw a little bit of signs of it, but everything else led to either electrical or vacuum, but in fact it was not. So as you're going through doing your diagnosis, you know, I hope this helps, just walking through all the processes and the steps, but that ended up being what it was for this vehicle.